I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The board will now adjourn into executive session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, private consultation with the board's attorney. 551.072, discussing purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. 551.074, to discuss personnel or to hear complaints against personnel, and the time is 5:30. The board will now reconvene into open session, and the time is 6:22. Item 4, matters from executive session. A, personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074. 1, possible action regarding routine personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments, no action. 2, possible action regarding proposed recommendation for termination of Chapter 21 term contract employee, no action. 3, principal of Nimitz Middle School. Do I have a motion to approve the principal of Nimitz Middle School as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hasso. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item 4, introductions. Dr. Micah.
Thank you, Madam President. The new principal for Nimitz Middle School will be Jennifer Cooper. Mrs. Cooper is coming to will join Northeast family. She is currently an assistant principal at San Marcos High School. She's been there since 2015. Mrs. Cooper earned her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Texas at San Antonio in 2007 and her Master's of Education in Educational Administration from Lamar University in 2011.
Okay, thank you very much. Item B, possible action regarding purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property pursuant to Government Code Section 551.072. No action. C, possible action regarding consultation with board's attorney pursuant to Government Code Section 551.071. 1, pending and/or possible litigation. No action. 5, recognition. A, superintendent service and contributions to the Northeast Independent School District. Dr. Newman.
Thank you, President Grona, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. At this time, I'd like to call Colonel Robert Henson, our Director for Army Instruction, to address this item.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. Madam President, without objection, I ask that my uniformed contemporaries join me, along with Dr. Gotardi, for this presentation.
Absolutely.
Sir, right in the middle.
Seriously, what I have.
The JROTC instructor staff and I are here this evening to recognize and present a token of our appreciation, somewhat belated because of Mother Nature's uncooperative activity around our review time, to Dr. Gotardi. The presentation of a sword that represents leading and directing dates back beyond the Civil War years. The sword is an instrument used by leaders for directing and pointing, I have to get this politically correct, military personnel in the direction of concern. That's kind of nebulous there. Tonight, we use this instrument as a symbol of recognition of the authority and honor to Dr. Gotardi for his service to the district and support of the JROTC program as he closes his tenure as superintendent of schools. Dr. Gotardi, we salute you and wish your future to be bright. Now, In addition, sir, there's one other item that we would like to present in cooperation with Ms. Grona, our board president, who will read the certificate and make the presentation. Yes, ma'am.
This is from the state of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott. To all to whom these presents shall come, greetings. Know ye that this official recognition is presented to Dr. Brian G. Gotardy. Congratulations on your well-deserved retirement after 34 years of service in public education. As a teacher, coach, principal, superintendent, and so much more, you have made a difference in the lives of young Texans through the many positions you have held. Public education professionals inspire and teach our children that their opportunities are limitless if they only dream, dare, and do. Today, I join my fellow Texans in commending the role you have played in ensuring the success of our children, our brightest promise for the future. First Lady Cecilia Abbott joins me in sending best wishes for an enjoyable and fulfilling retirement. Item B, Dr. Brian Gotardy, retiring superintendent of Northeast ISD, has been named recipient of the University Council of Educational Administration's Excellence in Educational Leadership Award for 2019. This award is given to outstanding school leadership practitioners who have made significant contributions to the improvements of leadership preparation. Dr. Newman.
Thank you, President Grona, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. At this time, I would like to call Dr. David Thompson with the University of Texas San Antonio for this presentation.
President Grona, members of the board, Dr. Micah, and members of the executive staff and guests, my name is David Thompson. I'm a faculty member in educational leadership and policy studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm a proud Northeast ISD resident, taxpayer, and parent. My remarks are going to be very brief. I'm going to introduce two of my colleagues and my current boss and my former boss. I'm going to start with my current boss, Dr. Margot Della Carpini, Vice Provost for Strategic Educational Partnerships and Dean of the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Texas at San Antonio. To Dean Della Carpini's left and my far left is Dr. Betty Merchant, Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at UTSA, previously the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, and LOAC Distinguished Professor of Educational Leadership. I am turning this over to Dean Della Carpini and Vice Provost Della Carpini to make this presentation.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for having us here tonight. I'm very honored to be here, and I am proud to announce that I'm the newest member of the Northeast Independent School District. I just bought a house here and jumped ship from Northside, so I am now a taxpayer here as well. So I'm happy to be here. So yes, I'm very honored to be able to present the University Council for Educational Administration Excellence in Educational Leadership Award. As was mentioned, this is an award that goes to a practicing school administrator who shows their commitment to the field and the profession through partnership with the university. As superintendent of the Northeast Independent School District, Dr. Gotardi has been a transformative leader. He has had transformative effects on the district and in the San Antonio community. His leadership of the multi-year Transforming the Future strategic planning process has resulted in a legacy that will have positive impact on the students, families, school professionals, staff, and the community for years to come. Dr. Gotardi has been a change agent, a culture builder, a visionary leader, and an effective manager. He is also a true partner with UTSA. His work as an instructor in our leadership preparation programs has helped to prepare the next generation of school leaders in our community and beyond. He has had a positive impact on the professional preparation of a large number of school leaders, many who are here working in the district on a daily basis and making a difference on a daily basis. His work with the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department on a redesign of our superintendent preparation and certification program, and his willingness to say yes when asked to be part of any number of events and initiatives that we are always asking him to be a part of, paints a picture of a true servant leader. Our superintendent and principal preparation programs are required to develop effective leaders who understand deeply the new realities within schools and communities, and the collaborative partnerships that we have with Dr. Gotardi and the district have helped us collectively be agents of change and transformation. The role of superintendent is not easy. I actually hold school district administration certification from New York State, and for a very brief time early in my career, I had the pleasure of functioning as a school administrator, so I deeply understand the complex role, to say the least, that a superintendent has. Effective superintendents are essentially the CEOs of very large corporations. They oversee multi-million-dollar budgets and hundreds of employees. They work with community organizations and the media, and they're expected to serve as change agents, and if that wasn't enough, they're expected to give back to the profession. And that is what this award is about. This award is being presented to Dr. Gotardi for embodying all of the attributes of an effective servant leader and of a true partner. I believe that school leadership is among the few professions that's not just a job or a career, but it's a true calling. And I'm honored to be able to present this award to Dr. Gotardi for his outstanding leadership and partnership. And I will ask Dr. Merchant to please come up. Congratulations.
All right, guys, if some of you will go towards the back, because we're gonna wanna make it smaller and just kind of face the window so I can see everyone's face. Perfect. Let me see if I can see everybody. Here we go. I see everyone's face. Go on three. 1, 2, 3. Very nice. One, 2, 3. Are you leaving, Dr. Gotardi? Do you have homework to do?
I really don't.
Well, enjoy your evening.
Thank you very much for putting both of those agenda items
Yes.
on the agenda tonight.
We were happy
I
to do
certainly
it.
appreciate it.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
Always good to see you.
Yes, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank y'all. Have a nice budget study session.
I guess it'd be rude to stick our tongue out at him, huh?
Hey, leave me the sword. No. Before we move on, we just finished our 4 days of 8 graduations, and we could not have done it without the support and help and work of a lot of people. And I'm going to name some. I'm sure I'm going to miss some names. But truly, it takes a village. And the first person I'm going to start with is Dr. Brummett. And you took care of every want and need of us. And I just want to thank you so much for everything that you did to ensure that the graduations ran smoothly and that in our little, I keep wanting to call it a holding cell, but it was really a very nice room where we stayed in between graduations. But you made sure that everything was just perfect, and I appreciate that. Marie, thank you for the snacks. They were delicious. Did you get the picture with Sandy holding all of her stuff? Joey Martinez and facility maintenance were there the entire time too, making sure that everything was just perfect for all the graduations. Chief McCampbell overseeing the metal detectors, and then we had people from transportation, maintenance, custodial services, school nutrition, KINS, and even some of our administrative interns were manning those metal detectors. And I heard that it just went so smoothly, and there were no problems. And we confiscated items, so it really was worth having them. And it just, we heard nothing but positive things about the process. So thank you for all the staff that did that. Jason Cattell, who I asked him today how many steps he took if he had a Fitbit or a Apple Watch, because he was all over the Coliseum taking pictures. They were amazing. Jimmy, I don't know how to say his last name, and Carlos, who did the video and the live streaming and oversaw the NISA students who were there doing that. It was amazing. Those NISA students are amazing doing all that. We had staff from communications who were there interviewing parents, and Scott Chidgey, he came and did Facebook Live. And I think y'all all know I'm not real comfortable talking live in front of people, but he just made it so easy. And he's awesome. And it, I think, was successful. How many views have we had? A lot. And the principals and their staff did an amazing job at each of the graduations. Yes, everybody who came and supported their school for the graduation. So thank you all for letting me recognize everyone, because it was an amazing 4 days. We had a great time. We enjoyed every ceremony. And so anyway, thank you for letting me do that. The next item is,
Shannon,
oh,
We're calling the green room instead of the holding cell.
The green, it was a very nice room. Item 6, presentations. A, budget study session number 2. Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. I just want to say that Ron thanks you also for allowing him to be there. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the... Tonight, we bring you budget study session number 2. There's a lot of information. We had our first one a couple weeks back, and there was some uncertainty. We had just gotten the bill, and we've been reading it, and we got some TEA notification yesterday around 4:03, and we've changed things up a little bit. So I know Brian and Susie have been running back and forth. If they had a Fitbit today, they would have put in a lot of miles. But anyway, we're going to jump right in, and we have an agenda of all the items. And like I said, there's quite a bit of items, and we can interject some stuff, and I know Dr. Micah wants to add some. So with that, I turn it over to Brian Moy, our Executive Director of Finance and Accounting.
Thank you, Dan. Madam President, board members, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. One thing that we were sure to tell you in budget study session number 1 was that everything was preliminary, that we were still trying to get a grasp of it. And I'm here to tell you that there are some major differences just in the last, okay, how long has it been? How many days? Since May 28th, however many days ago that is. There are a lot of changes from what we showed you on May 28th. So we're going to start off with what's different. Then I'm going to turn it over to Susie Lackgorn, Director of Budget and Financial Analysis. She'll go over compensation options and just basically how our whole compensation plan might shake out. Then we'll be turning it over to Steve Tovar, Senior Director of Risk Management, Benefits, and a couple of other things, Health Services and Safety. There we go. He'll be going over any changes we might have to our health plan. And turn it back over to Susie to go over our staffing numbers, our campus staffing numbers for next year, any AARs that were approved. Then I'll jump back in and kind of do a wrap-up of the general fund, and then we'll it's going to only take about 5 minutes each on school nutrition and debt service. There was a lot of things we could have done on budget study session number 1 that we pushed here, so unfortunately this is going to be a longer meeting, but just that whole paradigm shift of HB3 just needed to be its only focus last meeting. Okay, so as of May 28th, we were telling you that we were going to have a gain of $26 million due to implementing House Bill 3. Just from the information provided by TEA at around 4:03 yesterday afternoon, we think that gain's going to be just under $22 million. One memo from DEA, $4 million gone. It's actually around 21.7. So the TEA documents basically show how they're calling them proxies or numbers to keep in place for now until they actually write the rules for the new Comp Ed program. Shows us that no, we're not going to get near as much Comp Ed funding as we thought we were going to get. So the entirety of that $4 million is really in compensatory ed. So you may ask, but the Legislative Budget Board also said you were going to get $26 million. Well, the Legislative Budget Board runs have a lot of things that are not district specific. They have a lot of assumptions and statewide averages built in because they can't get into the nitty gritty of every single district's detail information. Now, Mo Casey had done a set of runs, which is one of the reasons, one great thing about being in TSA and working with a group like Mo Casey, is they get to have some of our detailed information. It may be a few months old, but it's not completely, they're not taking statewide averages. And they initially had been coming up with this number. Things that they've released today kind of also are leaning me more towards now 22. Some of their new calculations are leading me towards 22 instead of 26. But again, we don't know until the summary of finance comes out and the rules are written. And we were told in no uncertain terms by TEA Summary of finance is final. What they put in that number, you do not appeal.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about why, what they're using as far as instead of EcoDis?
Yeah, so as we've mentioned, that they're instead of just having compensatory education being based on how many children you have that qualify for free and reduced lunch in our school nutrition services program, they are going to be taking every student, what their physical address is, what census block that address fits into, and then look at what are different characteristics of that census block. What is the median household income? What's the ratio of single-family home, single-parent homes? Educational attainment of the homeowner, in other words, our parents. And then other, whatever the rules and the commissioner and his committee decide to create. And when TEA released their proxies yesterday, it shows that we would actually have fewer what they're now going to be called educationally disadvantaged students than we actually had as a simple count of free and reduced lunch students. We don't know how that's going to work. One thing that we do know is that, well, we expect, history has shown us, that even if those numbers are wrong and we get 2,000 more educationally disadvantaged than what this proxy is saying, they know they only have a certain pot of money available to pay for comp ed. So they're going to shift things around to make sure that it fits across the state, that all the dollars fit. So if they said we're going to get 48 million in comp ed funding instead of 52 million in comp ed funding, well, if they change the numbers up, they'll just move us to a lower tier to make sure the funding still works. So we, as of this point, I'm very much leaning towards ensuring that we work this budget, assuming 21.7 million revenue increase due to HB3, not 26 million. What else has changed? Well, we now have a different definition of how to calculate the mandatory compensation increase. HB3 says that the mandatory compensation increase uses 30% of the net gain in revenue. We were working off of, okay, you have what we would have had HB3 not been implemented. What are we going to have after HB3 is implemented? That's the net gain. What did HB3 change? No. That's not how it works. We have to look at what are we getting in 2018-19 per student, even though it's on a different system, versus what do we think we're going to get next year on the new system. Take the difference, multiply times their ADA. So your gain for purposes of the compensation increase, unfortunately, is based on an apples to orange calculation. Here's where we were on the 28th, but tweaking it to take out that 4 million of state revenue. We thought, okay, old law to new law, we're going to gain $355 per student. We're going to lose a lot of tax money because of compressing the tax rate from $1.04 to 97 cents. But then the state's going to kick in a bunch of money. Net, we're going to gain $355 per student. You multiply that times what I'm estimating our average daily attendance to be next year. So the gain for purposes of compensation increase, this has nothing to do with revenue increase. The gain for purposes of computing compensation was 21.6 million. You take 30% of that, you must for the raise. We must provide a pay increase of at least 6.5 million. 75% of the 6.5 million, or 4.9 million, had to be used for teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses. The remainder can be used for other full-time employees. But here's where we are today. Now, instead of comparing where we would have been in 1920 old law versus 1920 new law, now we're comparing 1819 old law versus 1920 new law, 1819 old law versus 1920 new law. So it bumps up that total per average daily attendance to $531 per student. We're still expecting to have 60,782 ADA next year. So that means our gain for purposes of compensation increase, not our revenue increase, our gain for purposes of compensation of 32.3 million. So the minimum raise is 30% of that, 9.7 million. 75% of the 9.7 must go to teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses, 7.3 million. 2.4, we must provide a pay raise for all other full-time employees. And how we might do that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lackhorn, and I'll be back up later.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. So we know HB 3 requires compensation. Mr. Moy just showed us that we have to spend 9.7 million in total, 7.3 on our designated groups. Let's look at what we've done in the past before we talk about ways to get there. So this is a 10-year pay raise history for the district. And in it, we've also added in inflation, just so that you can get a feel for how our raises have trended with inflation over the last 10 years. For the most part, pretty decent job keeping track with inflation. Luckily for us, Texas CPI has been relatively low in the last decade. You'll notice a few years where things got lean. 11-12 would have been one of those really bad years. If you remember, a previous state funding system didn't have enough revenue to keep funding it once the recession hit in 2008. And eventually that caught up with the state and they did massive cuts to education. And at that point in time, the district got hit really hard, and you can see there's a 0 there representing pay increase for that year. So that is always in the back of our minds as we are looking at HB 3, as we definitely don't want a repeat of that history happening to us. Okay? So let's take a look at what it costs to give a raise. So here's just giving you a frame of reference. We've split out our 4 designated groups into a subtotal here, but this is what a 1%, 2%, 3%, and a 4% raise costs the district. 1% totals about 3.5 million, 7.5 for 2, 11.6 for 3, and about 15.7 for 4. A lot of things go into this. This includes the cost of benefits. At the same time that salaries are being mandated, compensation increases are being mandated, the state did a lot of movement on TRS, so rates changed too. So we factored that in here. So we have some pluses from the TRS and increases. It's a lot of movement. So just a little disclaimer there that it's not the pure salary number. It includes additional Medicare costs, things like that. So let's just throw out a scenario. Next week, you will have a recommended compensation plan to review. This week, we're just showing you what effect a possible scenario would play out on our financials, okay? So if we did a 3% raise across the board to all employees, HB 3 requires we have to differentiate our more experienced classroom teachers. So 6 years and up have to have differentiation. They don't define that. They don't give any parameters for it. Other than that, you have to do it. So if we were to give 6 to 15-year teachers an extra $600 on top of the 3%, and then 16-year teachers and above $1,200 on top of the 3%, this scenario this cost is what that would look like. 3% for a teacher comes out to be about $1,700. So for a 6-year teacher, it would be $1,700 plus $600 for $2,300. That actually equates to about a 4.4% increase when you throw in the $600. A 16-year teacher would get the $1,700 plus $1,200 for $2,900. That comes out to be 5.2%. All of this would cost, for the 4 designated groups, about $10.4 million. Now, we're required to do 7.3. 10.4 is above and beyond that by a significant amount.
Susie,
Yes,
on differentiation pay, it could be benefits, it doesn't actually have to be
absolutely. Mhm.
dollars. It could be through your increase in providing the benefits, but for this scenario, we're showing that we're increasing at different levels. It's only 6 years and above, but we kind of differentiated between 6 and through 15 and then 16 and above. But technically, the law, like she said, there's no parameters. It could be through your benefits that you can do the differentiation, so.
Yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out.
No specifics, no amounts. And so they're leaving it to the district's discretion on how to differentiate. They're mandating a minimum amount, but they're leaving it up to our discretion to differentiate.
So I think with this scenario, it's what, 3 million more than the requirement?
Yes.
And that's because of the differentiation.
Right, just ma'am, and just using this scenario, if that's what we would do, we would be doing 3 million more than what would be prescribed by the law.
Could you say one more time what that required amount was?
The required amount for this group of employees is 7.3. The
7.3.
total required amount's 9.7. I have my little cheat sheet, so I don't. So, as Dan was saying, the ledge actually specifically mentioned health insurance because that's really gotten out of hand for a lot of school district employees. And we're going to get to a point where I'm showing you what those costs look like for the district. And then Mr. Tovar is going to come up and give you an overview of our health plan, but you'll get a good feel of what that compensation together looks like here in a minute. But let's go on and finish looking at the rest of the employees at 3%. That costs another 4.1 million, leaving this scenario to cost the district about 14.5 million, and which is well above that 9.7 that we'd be required to do. Okay? So now let's move. Yes? Yes, no, not at all. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. All right, so let's look at health. Northeast has historically had a strong focus on health insurance, and administration has always made it a priority and tried very hard in years that we couldn't give compensation or we gave small compensation increases to do everything they could to mitigate the increase to health insurance. Because there's nothing more disappointing than being told you're getting a raise and then you get your check and the net pay is less than what you had the year before because your health insurance ate up everything. So the district's always had a pretty strong focus in that area to try to keep those situations from happening. So let's take a look at our contributions to health and life insurance. This is from our financial statements. And we just take, for each of these years, 2013 to 2018, we took the expense amount in our annual financial report and divided it by the number of employees to see the average amount per employee the district was contributing to health insurance costs. This isn't the amount that we contribute per person because it gets averaged out by the number of employees at a point in time versus matching it all the way through the year. This is the only way to compare apples to the other districts. So when we look at 2013, Northeast was contributing about $4,100 per employee. Move to 2018, and we're contributing about $5,256. That's a 28.9% increase over those 5 years. When you average the districts in Bexar County, you can tell that they're a lot lower than Northeast. 2013 was $3,300. 2018, they're only at $4,012. Their average for 2018 is less than what our average was for 2013. And over that period of time, it had only increased 21.1% for the Bexar County average. When you do the differential, in 2013, we were contributing $767 more, or 23.2%. By the time you get to 2018, we're contributing over $1,200 more per employee. It's a 31% increase over the Bear County districts. So you can tell, over time, we've always made this a priority, and it's an important part of the district's compensation package.
You can say that.
Yes.
Because some of you guys weren't around at that point, as you can see on this slide, the Board of Trustees has really made a commitment to keep healthcare costs low over time for employees. That has been a real focus for this school district and this board. And as that slide demonstrates it for you all. So I can tell you, when I moved back to Northeast, I got a pay raise, a sizable pay raise per month, just in health benefit costs. Because I was paying for my family and I almost $1,000 more a month in health insurance in my other district.
David said thank you. He wanted to know that.
And just to tag on to that, Dr. Micah, my brother calls me every year. He's a teacher in another district. And every year he calls to ask me, what are you paying for health insurance? And every time I tell him, he's like, what? And so he always threatens to come work with me, and I keep telling him it's a really bad idea. We don't need two of us in the same district. So-
Do you have the number on the next closest district to the amount that's being paid?
We have some comparisons in the next slide that kind of lead you in that direction. But one thing I want to say on this slide is that you notice there's a lot of white space here. We used to have on this very same slide our state peers included, so we could compare, because we go out statewide and look for districts that are similar in size and demographics. And when Mr. Moy and I and when we started looking at plans, we couldn't find comparable plans outside of Bear County. The peer districts in the state have really narrowed down their plans, and a lot of them are now doing in-network only. And they're not even allowing you to go outside the network. And so we really didn't feel it was fair to compare ourselves to them because it just looks so different.
And since we're talking about it, I guess we can mention that, you know, a lot of the districts in the state have gone to active care, and you're going to see what it costs some of these folks. Later on in our presentation, we'll talk more about the health plans that we have. But, you know, we're self-funded, and we still have a 90-10 plan. We have an 80-20 plan, and we have a high deductible plan. But most districts, at the very most, they have an 80-20, and they're moving to 70-30. I mean, you have private insurance companies and employees that have private insurance that don't have 90-10 plans. So that's one of our richest plans. And when you look at how much it costs other peer districts, how much the take-home pay for those employees, I think you'll see that I think we run a pretty good insurance. And thanks to the board, there was 5 years in a row back in the late 2000s that we never raised insurance premiums to the employees. So, I mean, if you were to look at how much we've gone up, it hasn't been detrimental to our employees as far as our health plan in the last 19 years, I would say.
All right, so let's take a look at some examples. Since we're really only feeling comparable to Bear Counties, we selected 4 districts within Bear County to compare our plans to. We picked our low PPO plan because that is by far our most popular plan. And it's really hard to find any plans that compare to that 90-10 plan anymore. So we really are, as Dan said, one of the few people that still have one. So this also has TRS Active Care Plan 2, which several districts in the area are on, and that's the closest one. So you can compare deductibles and out-of-pockets and co-pays for office visits and such. And you can see, you know, there's plenty of differences here, but relatively kind of similar plans, all at co-insurance of 80%. But look down at the bottom at your monthly premiums. So employee only at Northeast is just over $100, But if you look at the other districts, they're all close to 200. TRS active care is really, really kind of high. I will defend that number a little bit. I had to exclude a district out of that group that's in the Bexar County that would have probably brought that number down, but I couldn't get my hands on the data. So it might have made it look a little bit better, but there's no guarantee. Employee child, you can see $243 versus $590 is the closest one. Employee spouse, again, we're seeing very large differentials there. I'm on employee family, and so when I look at the next closest one, it's $500 a month difference, which comes out to be $6,000, which is what Dr. Micah said he got a big raise. It's why my brother calls me once a year. So it's quite shocking, and I got to tell you, every year when I do this slide, that's one of the many moments that I go, man, I'm really glad I work for Northeast. So it's always a nice refresher whenever we're putting this information together. So let's take a look at how these premiums translate into net pay for our teachers. So this is 1819 teacher pay. The first line is base pay for teachers. I know this is a lot of numbers. I'm going to kind of walk you through it slowly, okay? So that first line's annual base pay for those 4 districts that we were looking at before. Divide that by 12 and get your monthly base pay. That first line in gray, the difference in monthly base pay, you can see Peer A pays $148 more per month to the average teacher than we do. We're higher than Peer B by $139, and Peer C, our average pay is almost exactly the same, just $7 different. Peer D, they're paying $88 more per month. But when you start factoring in health insurance premiums, we start seeing a very different story. The middle section shows us employee-only premiums. So the district's employees are paying, Northeast employees are paying $107 on employee-only. When you take that off of the monthly base pay of $4,659, that means their monthly net pay is $45.52. That district that was paying $148 more than we are, because their premium's $220 compared to our $107, now the differential in net pay is only $35 instead of $148 of the gross pay. So you can see very quickly, I've highlighted in red the numbers that the other district, you take more home. But as soon as we get past employee only, when we move down to employee child, because our premiums are so much lower, we take home more than everybody else in this group. The same thing applies when you get down to employee spouse and employee family, and we start seeing differentials in the $600 and $700 down there, which when you multiply that by 12 is a lot of money.
And that's net pay. I mean, that's
Yep.
what we're trying to calculate net. That's not gross. So that's actual dollars that they're not getting.
Yep, so that gross salary, you know, for that one district, your monthly gross is $148 higher in that other district, but if you're on employee family, you would take home $350 more a month at Northeast.
Sorry, Susan.
No.
So because you all were buying down health insurance, you've been putting money back into the pockets of employees. It just doesn't appear in a salary, but it does it through the benefits. So that investment that you guys have been doing and that commitment over all this time plays out in real dollars into the employee. Oftentimes, though, they don't, a lot of people, in fact, I've spoken to many different teachers or different employees that come in and didn't really calculate this. But I will say that 2 years ago, I was at convocation, spoke to 2 teachers, and they said, I'm really here for the health insurance. That's why I'm here. And then they had calculated what they were getting in another district and coming, and they said, even though I'm going to make a little less, I'm going to make more because of the savings in health insurance. So to some people, they do calculate and figure these things out. But to a lot of people, they don't. You know, a lot of employees don't. And that's why this piece, I wanted you all to see as a board, because you've committed to this, that it really has a really great benefit to the employees in our school district.
And just to reiterate, I mean, when teachers or employees come from other districts, they realize what they had been paying at those districts. A lot of times, employees who start here and this is their whole career at Northeast, they don't really see the difference because this is all they've known. It's those that come from other districts that can say, hey, wait, just like Dr. Micah said, there is a big difference. But if you're homegrown and you've been here your whole career, you might not see it. And, you know, $440 for family coverage, you might think, well, that's a lot of money. But when you do compare, if you compare to other districts, it's not really that bad.
And I will tell you all that we have had over time districts try to join us in healthcare. As you see Dan laughing, going, shaking his head. Because our guys do such a great job of managing this that we're able to continue to provide this kind of benefit to our employees. And so they haven't even gotten to the best part yet for next year.
And just to let you know, and our teachers, a lot of our teachers do recognize this. 80% of our teachers take our insurance, as opposed to being on their spouse's plan or anything else. We see a lot more instances of we carry the teacher's spouse who may have, you know, it's a job somewhere else, may have access to a plan, but they join us.
My husband teaches in a district that's on active care, so he's here with me. All right. Okay, if you don't have any questions in that area, then Mr. Tovar is going to come up and speak in depth about the health plan.
Good afternoon. Good evening, I mean. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. We're going to give you just a short overview of the health plan, try and give you an idea of what 2020 will look like. Like you've heard tonight, it is a self-funded health plan. It's a very rare animal in the state of Texas in school districts. 90% of the school districts are on the active care plan. That leaves only 10% of the other districts that have their own procure their own insurance. And out of that small pie, there's only a handful that self-fund. The other ones, they procure their own, but they're fully insured. And self-funded just really works for us, and it helps us save money for our employees. We have a very healthy participation also, and I think it's because of the rates that are very attractive. 75% of our employees participate in our health plan, so 6,575 employees participate. Along with that, they bring 7,440 dependents with them for a total of 14,000 lives that are covered on our self-funded health plan. And like we've talked here, the district has been very good at funding the majority of the premiums. Right now, it is running at 69%, where the district is contributing towards the premiums, and the employees on average fund 31%. We did see an increase in our claims this year, for 2018. Our medical increased $3.6 million, or 8.6%. Our pharmacy, even though it's a smaller piece of the pie, increased 2.1, almost as much as the medical side, at 15.1%. And I'm sure you've heard the news. You know, every year the cost of medical care goes up, pharmacy costs especially. We also like to look and see how are we doing, how much are we spending on our health care per employee. We're forecasting, you know, because of that increase from 2018, that it will be hitting $9,822 per employee. We went to the Mercer health plan study, and for the region, that average is $11,649. So even though $9,800 is a lot of money, we're still below the average. So where do our dollars go to? Most of them go to the physicians. The professionals, physicians are 35% of the pie. Pharmacy is the second largest cost at 25%. Facility, your hospital at 20%, outpatient at 16%. The other two smaller ones, we spend about 2% on administrative costs and 2% on reinsurance. So we purchase reinsurance, since we're a self-funded plan, we purchase reinsurance for those very large claims to protect us. And we pay a premium for that, but when we get those large claims, the reinsurance company will pay those other claims. This is a 5-year look at our premiums. Of the last 5 years, 3 of those years our employees have had no increase. We had an increase in 15 and 17. And for the district, 2 of those 5 years we didn't have an increase for the district. So looking forward to 2020 plan year, our projected revenue is $67.2 million. Our projected expenses are $70.6 million, giving us a projected loss of $3.4 million. So how are we going to deal with that $3.4 million shortfall? Well, one of the ways is we're going to look at what pharmacy is doing. And the largest increase we had on pharmacy was on specialty drugs. That increased by 25%, and traditional was about 10%. So one of the things that we can do is do a plan design change on the pharmacy side, and Blue Cross has a performance drug list. They use this drug list on all of their fully insured plans and their larger self-funded plans. What it means is that that list provides the best value generics and the brand drugs. For our members, Blue Cross estimates that 4.9% of our members could see a pharmacy change, and 1.4% of the members would require a tier change. But that savings is estimated at $1.65 million.
Quick question on the pharmacy stuff. Do you have any information on the district employees and what percentage are willing to change out of whatever their drug might be that they've been taking forever, and then they say, oh yeah, I can move to this other one that's cheaper?
Right. And when you have a drug change like that, that's when you go back and talk to your physician about a particular drug that may not be covered. You talk to your doctor and say, what are the alternatives? Here's what's covered under the plan, so that they can make a decision with their physician.
So will this 1.65 go toward that 3.4 million shortfall?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. On the medical side, the largest increase we saw was inpatient or hospital. That increase was almost 15%. Professional was up 5%, outpatient 3%. The proposed plan design change on the medical is dealing with the out-of-network emergency care coverage. For example, you have ER physicians and anesthesiologists that work in in-network hospitals, but they choose to not contract with any insurance companies at all. And so under that current payment system, we pay them based on bill charges. On the proposed change, we would pay them a usual and customary or reference-based pricing. And the estimated savings on that is $1.35 million. So with the 1.65 and 1.35 savings, we're looking at proposing a no rate increase for an additional year for our employees, and no increase for the district either. So as we look at the fiscal year, projected revenue, $67.2 million. The recommended funding with those two changes gives us recommended at $66.7 million, about a $500,000 profit. for the fiscal year, and on the plan year, which is just a little bit further out, a $400,000 deficit. As we look at the fiscal year for 2020 budget, that 67.2 less the 66.7 gives us that 500,000. That would be added to a projected net assets, and then we would end up with a projected 23.4 million in ending net assets, or 4.2 million, 4.2 months of expenses. On the dental and vision, our dental plan is also self-funded. No rate increase there for another year. And the vision, we're fully insured on that, but no plan changes or premium increases there. Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And like they did mention, it really has been an active decision by this board to recognize that benefits are important to our employees, and you know, other districts might pay a little bit more, but that take-home pay is greater for our employees here. So, thank you.
Okay, so let's jump back to the general fund. You just saw that we have no anticipated increase to the district contribution because the fund is operating at a very nice level. So let's talk about staffing. As you know, we have kids, we gotta have teachers. So every year, we do our projections on how many kids we're gonna have next year. Have to figure out what that change is for our staff. So next year, we're expecting to add 33 additional teaching FTEs for a cost of $2 million. The increase is all in elementary, with some decreases in secondary offsetting that. It's 41 FTEs added in elementary. This includes additional staff allocated to transition to full-day pre-K. So as you can imagine, you're kind of doubling. If you were teaching 2 sessions, now you need another teacher to help offset that. It's not an exact doubling by any means, but they've spent a lot of time looking at it. We're going to put a disclaimer on it because knowing how many kids would rather do full day versus half day, it's all estimates. So keep that in mind. Another big change for next year is that we're going to staff more closely at 22-1. So last year we had a group of campuses where we staffed at 23-1, and submitting waivers was a regular practice if, you know, we were close to it but not meeting it. We do not anticipate the same ability to submit waivers this upcoming year with HB3 providing additional funding. So we're staffing not completely at 22-1, but close. We're looking for that sweet spot because it's all estimates. So you want to not overstaff because you know you're staffing based on estimates, but you also don't want to be running around in the fall hiring a bunch of teachers. So we're hoping that we're right in the middle where whatever we have to do, there's not a lot of it. We did plan to increase the superintendent's contingency to $3 million so that in the fall, if we have to hire more teachers to meet that 22-1 as the real enrollment starts rolling in, then we have the flexibility to do that. We've been doing this practice all these, since I've been here. And typically we run with like a $2.5 million contingency, but next year we're looking for 3 just because we know the waiver option isn't going to be as available. So other changes, we're just a net change of 2 reduction at middle school and a net change of 6 at high schools. So not a lot of changes there.
Real quick on the contingency.
Yes.
What's our history on using that and what?
It all comes down to enrollment.
Sure.
So in years that the kids show up exactly, in line with where we expected it, we won't spend a whole lot of money. Some years we hardly spend any if, as we've seen more kids not show up, we've seen some kids move to charters. Other years, they just show up in the wrong places. And, I don't know why they didn't ask me before they moved here.
And last year, during this current year, we used almost all of those funds, the contingency on having to hire, because they were showing up at different schools.
Not
and-
only that, we had a lot more students show up this
Right.
year than what we were anticipating.
Right.
So when that happens, you can say goodbye to the contingency, but it's a good thing
It's a good
because you'll
thing.
have more revenue
Right.
from their ADA. So it balances.
And David, just so that you're aware, a couple of years ago, our projections were off over 1,400 students. So then we had to come back the following year and correct it by cutting a lot of positions. Now, we did it through attrition, but we cut over 100 positions to make it up. So that's the sweet spot that she's talking about. In fact, I use Gary's Goldilocks theory here. That's right. You can't go too little and you can't go too much. You got to try to find something right in the middle, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so we also have non-teaching professional staff changes. We're adding 15 additional FTEs, 1.1 million. That dollar amount, those number of staff is actually not exact. I'm telling you the number of staff we're adding, but some of this is partially funded through federal funds. So this is the cost to the general fund. We're going to add 12 FTEs at elementaries, 7 speech pathologists, 4 school psychologists, and 2 half counselors at 2 elementaries. So for 1. Middle school is only having a change of a half of an FTE, and high school of 2.5. And some of that's all over the place. If I were to cover this stuff in detail, you wouldn't like me very much. We would be here a lot longer. So we're giving you the net effect, if that's okay. Campus assistant FTEs, we're looking at adding 30 for $800,000. 34.5 of that's at elementary. 24.5 FTEs of that 34.5 is pre-K. And another 10 instructional assistants. And this kind of holds the same as teachers. If we need special ed assistants or pre-K in the fall, we'll use that same contingency to hire that staff as we need them. So. And minor changes again in middle and high school. All right, that covers staffing. Every year, as we prepare to build the next year's budget, we give our departments and campuses an opportunity to request additional funds. We call these requests additional allocation requests. And they get the fun joy of putting in and justifying their needs, and then executive staff reviews it and determines which priorities we have for the next year. And so we're going to give you a preliminary look at what we think that's going to look like for next year. For next year, right now, we're looking at possibly adding 1.2 million to the budget. 386,000 would be for staffing. I'll give you details on these in a minute. Non-staff ongoing costs would be close to 800,000, and then little bitty one-year non-staffing stuff about 20,000 for a total of 1.2. And our associates really love the fact that we break this out by division. It's a competition each year to see who gets the lowest amount. Mr. Villarreal wins this year. Congratulations. You don't get anything. All right, so business services, not surprising, insurance rates go up, and we have to insure our buildings and facilities. We also add square footage every year. So Mr. Sullivan in the bond program is constantly adding square footage, and that just increases our premiums too. So we're looking to add $235,000 to that insurance budget for
And
next year.
The hail damage of 3 years ago, where we received almost 23 million, I'm sure they're looking at us now and trying to raise the rate. So it's not really that big an increase because we did add square footage, but I just wanted to throw that out that, we did get some insurance proceeds a few years back, so I'm sure they're looking at us.
Yeah, you always have to pay for that after the fact. So also we have the Raptor system, which I'm sure you are each very familiar with when you visit our campuses. We've had that system for a long time now, and some of that equipment needs to be replaced. So that's only $25,000.
So I actually asked Miss Williams if she knew what the Raptor was, and she says David wants to know what Raptor is. So the Raptor system is when you come into the school, you have to turn over your driver's license, and it is run through the system and does a background check for, pardon? 48 states, but it's sex offender.
Yes.
So it's looking for sex offenders. And so those systems are, they're getting old, and we need to do that. It prints out a photo badge, so you get your background run as a sex offender, and then it gives you a badge to be on the campus.
So I've actually been run through that system. I thought it was just printing my nice picture.
Congratulations, you came out clean.
David says thank you.
All right, moving on to instruction. Next year, we're looking to add 6 roving teachers. They're going to have 3 campuses each. They're going to teach math hyper-acceleration. So this should be, correct me if I'm wrong, 5th graders who take 6th grade math. And these teachers will go to those campuses who are for these kids to teach those classes that are taking a grade up, special hyper-accelerated math. Once again, this cost is partially offset by federal funds, so we're not funding all of this at the general fund level, so just a little bit of information there, in case you do the math on the 6 FTEs and the cost there. We're also looking to add $50,000 to the budget to pay tuition for the Mac Up program. And that's our magnet program over at MacArthur. And we're going to add $35,000 for restorative discipline at Montgomery. They are ramping up that program, and they are going to be a trauma-informed school. And so this will help them develop that program and meet those needs. And of course, we can't ever avoid mandates. UIL is requiring us to pay our referees more, and that's going to cost us about $21,000 next year. And then the next $59,000 is a whole lot of little ones all over the map that we also didn't want to take up too much time with you for. And so this totals about $500,000.
What's the federal amount or percentage on the roving teachers? Do you know that?
We've got a lot running through there. Some of our teachers are going to be 80-20, so I think 2 of those will be 80-20 on it. So 80% federal and 20% general fund. In operations, they will need to pay someone to come out and inspect and certify our fire alarms. Figured you did. Okay, that's it for AARs. So that's the 1.2 million. And now Mr. Moy's going to come back and do some recap of the general fund.
Okay, so that was a lot of information. We're just going to try and now grab 3 or 4 slides to sum up everything you just heard in the last hour for the general fund. So there was a lot of talk about, well, HB3 is going to be 21.7 million, but if you were actually look at our projected finances, we're actually going to probably have about a $30 million increase total revenue, but 8.5 million of that really has nothing to do with HB2. We just had, this was this has been a couple of strange years for one-time only items. For instance, that third line there, our school health and related services program, it's federal, but the money comes to general fund. It doesn't have its own fund, has traditionally been paying 2 years behind schedule. You turn in all your paperwork at the end of the year, 2 fiscal years later, you'll finally receive your payment. Well, now they're moving it to only being 1 year behind. So this year, we got 2 SHARS payments. Well, we're not going to get 2 SHARS payments every year, so I got to back that $5 million off of next year's revenue projection. When commercial properties do their protests and they get 3 years back refunds with penalties and interest, then that comes out of our pocket. But then what that really means is the appraisal district lowered their property value, which is why their bills are now, they're getting refunded on their bills because they lowered the property value. Well, if they get refunded for a 2016 tax bill, we get to go to the state through an appeals process and say, my 2016 state revenue is too low because you have too high of a property value out there. We actually thought we were going to get this 11.3 million this year. This is like 4 different fiscal years of protests. We talked to our consultant, and they're dragging their feet. He said, you will not get the cash until next year. So now I'm adding this money to next year. We had a large donation. We're not going to get that again next year. We talked about the insurance settlement. That's not ongoing money, and then a bunch of other stuff. So outside of HB3, it nets out to a change in revenue to the positive about $8.5 million. HB3 counts for about 21.7. We talked, everything here that Susie just went through, changes to campus staff, a lot of that being our first foray into looking at full-day pre-K. She went through the AARs, the compensation, the teaching FTEs, all this comes out to a total change to expenditures of an increase to expenditures of $15.8 million. The largest item in there is the pay raise of 14.5. So if you just want to compare expenditures by type, you can see that obviously the biggest increase for next year is in salaries and benefits. It's going up more than $13 million. Not a whole lot of change in most of the other line items. Some of that is just, the property insurance, the AARs, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to have about a $553 million expenditures for next year. And if we just were to push that out one more year into the biennium, it actually goes, you see it actually goes down a little bit to 552. The main reason for that is if we continue to project a small enrollment decline like we're showing for this year, you have less enrollment, you have fewer teachers, the whole 22-to-1. So that's really that difference there between the 479, the 478 is in assumed, for now, assumed changes to campus staffing. Obviously, we will make no decisions about 2021 until next June. All right, so what does this look like overall? Revenue going up about $30 million for this year from 18-19 to 19-20. A slight dip in 2020, 2021. Some of that is because stuff we're going to get next year is going to be one-time items. They're going to drop off. Plus, if we have a small dip in enrollment, you're going to have a small dip in state funding because we won't have the funding per ADA for that student. Expenditures going from $537 million to $553 million. So at this point, we would project that we would be dropping to the bottom line at this point just a shade over $14 million. It would bring our ending fund balance to $136 million, which equates to just over 3 months of operations. There is significant, the TEA used to actually have a minimum fund balance schedule that would be included in our audit. For many years, we weren't getting there. Before the recession, there was a year we were at 1.6 months in reserves. Not a lot of money, no flexibility whatsoever. So despite the challenges, we've actually built this up to a healthy reserve. Now, for 2020, 2021, it looks like it's going up again, but we haven't, again, we're not even at this point discussing what any sort of compensation package for that year would be, which would obviously, eat up most, if not all, of that 9.9 million that would theoretically be dropping to the bottom line in that year. So this model shows adding to fund balance of $14 million. Well, why don't we just spend our entire revenue increase this upcoming year? There's too much uncertainty right now. We've only started to really scratch the surface on the full day pre-K. Those teachers and assistants that we added, there could be more. Again, thank goodness we have $3 million contingency, so we don't have to come to you for budget amendments saying, hurry, 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 we need to add teachers. We got one memo from TEA on state comp ed on what the 5 tiers may look like. It is going to be so long until we know what that number is really going to be, much less what we're going to have to spend it on. Many of those rules on many of these programs, not just this one, we haven't even broached the mentoring program, the incentive pay program. We haven't broached any of those topics of HB3 yet, and what will they cost us?
Mm-hmm. And Brian, I think it bears repeating. That one email at 4:03, $4 million down we went. Just one email. There are so many pieces of this law that we don't know. It doesn't take very many emails at $4 million to be less, to eat up money very quickly.
That was actually one of my questions. So there could be additional $4 million emails at 403
Throughout
between
the-
now and, so if we, to answer your question, why not spend all the money now? We may not have all the money.
If we dedicate it to a certain position, project, program, and then we find out that it wasn't supposed to go there, we're not just going to call, hey, in January, hey, Ms. Jones, we hired you over here, but either you have to take this other job now or too bad. No, we're not going to do that. We really have to wait for Commissioner Morath to figure it all out before we know what we're doing.
And you'll recall the very first budget study session, I had just met with Mike Morath, right? He had been down at Region 20. And he said that day to every superintendent in Bexar County, I wouldn't rush out tomorrow and go spend your money. That right there tells you something's there, and he said, I don't even have the people in TEA to write all of these rules yet. So we don't know what's coming. We're, hoping it's good, but I truly, y'all, I think I said to you the last time, Brian and Dan were highlighted at a Region 20 superintendent or Bexar County superintendent meeting because of all of the work that they had done on House Bill 3 and how they had actually uncovered some things, and they were teaching as great as they did. They didn't see the 4 million loss coming.
And so do they have a projected date of when they may know what is going on? How are we supposed to, have an,
I think Commissioner Morath is going to have to hire some people to try to understand the bill himself. He doesn't have the staff. I think he also mentioned, he doesn't have the people to be able to decipher a lot of the bill. So they're looking at next spring to come out with some rules. Now, we're hoping it doesn't have that big a impact on dollars, but we just don't know. a slide earlier, we're showing that we're getting 21.7 off of House Bill 3, but we're spending almost 15 million of that on salaries. You know, we're dropping down 14 million, but a lot of that 14 million is made up of all these other little one-time deals. The $11 million that we got from the property value protest. So that's not even dollars that we're getting from House Bill 3. It's just $6 million left this year and then next year. So, you know, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and it's frustrating because when you get something at 4:03 the day before a budget study session, it kind of gets everybody really nervous.
That's only a few $4 million emails at 4:03 PM,
Right.
and then we're in trouble.
You know, our monthly expenditures are almost $45 million. And, I mean, that can go quickly. So, you know, dropping down $7 million, $14 million, that's just a small percentage of what we spend in a month. So you know, we're anticipating him answering a lot of things, but not for
Not for a good while.
6-9 months from now.
Okay, this should give you an idea of, they knew how uncertain comp ed was gonna be. And, I mean, it's a big chunk of money. We were thinking of the total state tier 1, it was that the comp ed allotment was gonna be like 52 million. Now we're thinking it's gonna be about 48 million. They know that it is the focus of HB3 is to put more money for the hardest to reach students. So they also knew that there was no way we were going to get rules in time for this year. So they've actually wrote in the bill. Okay, let me back up one second. If you remember from the last time, we talked about for every time there's a program, there's a certain level of required spending for that program. If you don't meet that required spending, you have to submit a corrective action plan to the commissioner. And he goes, okay, looks good, I'll release your money. Or if you don't do it, he withholds your state money next year. The bill says he is not allowed to impose financial penalties on us for missing spending requirements on a program that we don't know what's going to look like. So pretty much that tells you that it's possible that we could get through the entire fiscal year and they won't have ironed out everything with comp ed.
You know, and the soundbite that they got, I guess, when they signed, they all three got together, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker, stood up there and says, hey, we did $11.5 billion to education. They didn't. 6.1 is HB3, but 5.4 was tax relief. And like we showed you the last week or 2 weeks ago in our first study session, average homeowner, $224,000 is going to see $111 a year. So it comes out to less than $10 a month that they're going to see as far as tax relief. But it eats up 5.4 of that 11.5. So, the last 8 years, we've lost 120, 140 million when they did those cuts, and they're giving us back 21 million, and they're saying that we need to spend 11 of that. So they put a lot of strings, and it just seems like it's contracting. It's not the big windfall that people were thinking. It sounded good. The Senate was trumpeting 5,000 for teachers, and the House was saying they wanted all the money to go at our discretion. So they kind of met in the middle. So that's why we're at where we're at.
And do you mind if I say
No,
something,
please do.
Sandy,
Please
before you ask your question? So, stepping in March, now this is, nothing was law yet, but we saw an LBB run. And what you see tonight at this 21 is half of what it was in March. That's how quickly it went downward. And so, again, we thought we were a little bit better until yesterday at approximately 4:03, when I left having a great day to go down to the Tobin Center, and Dan texted me and said, hey, we just got an email and we're $4 million less now. And that's the ambiguity that's circulating around this bill right now. People really don't know. Now, I'm going to steal your thunder for a minute, all right? So you can see here, now I just want to walk you back in time just for a minute, and I'm not going to take long, but in '06, The ledge came out, cut it from $1.50 to $1, said, don't worry, school districts, will make up the money. We're going to do it in a franchise tax. The comptroller at the time said, you will not make this money up in a franchise tax. And they said, trust us. And then 11 hit, and you can see franchise tax didn't make up the money. This year, we were in Austin, and they said, the comptroller, I think it was an advisor to the comptroller,
Yes.
said, we have told the ledge, do not fund this through oil and gas. It is too volatile. Oil and gas is up and down. I've learned more about oil and gas prices than I care to I didn't even need to know, but I do now, since we're funding it on this. The break-even point for a barrel of West Texas crude is $50. That's break-even. It was $53.85. What, a week after? That's not too far away. Today in the paper, I'm going to steal it.
Go for it.
You can see here that Speaker Bonin came out and is quoted in the San Antonio Express News saying, we'll spend time before the 2021 legislative session studying how to ensure the investment in education and property tax relief will be sustainable. Y'all, kind of makes me worried. So I don't think they have a sustainability plan. And so it smells like 2006 all over again. And that's what has us concerned about spending it all today.
You know, recession hit in 08, 09, and that really made it quicken. I mean, the franchise tax plus the recession. So, you know, depending on who you listen to, you know, are we heading towards another recession? We don't know, but like Dr. Micah said, you know, oil keeps plummeting. It's a crazy thing. So it just makes it a little tough that they gave us this money after 8 years of not giving us any, and they put a lot of strings, and then it's kind of like not really there. So
Right, and I shared with Dan an article out of the paper. I don't know when I got it out of there. It was in the last week or so. It says they're predicting an oil surplus in 2020. Now, I'm not in economics, but I'm pretty sure a surplus means prices are going to go down.
Yes.
Remember, 50 is the break-even point. So there are a lot of factors at play in this bill.
Okay, I have a question. I'm trying to recall your exact words. So if you turn in paperwork for, help me out, and it was incorrect, then they can withhold your funds for the next year. So while they're writing all of these guidelines and we're going through the motions, because kids are coming to school in August and we have to hire teachers and life goes on, and then in the midst of the school year, they come out with, oh, guess what? Now we have these regulations and here are the parameters. And if we have not met those parameters, are we faulted?
No, that's what, in HB3, they actually wrote in that they cannot penalize us this year.
This year, but for next year?
Oh, but the rules will be in place by next year.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm just, because sometimes you just never know. But for next year, we're not penalized next year either. We just have to abide by whatever parameters they have.
But if we spend the money in the wrong area, we can't get it back.
Right, that's why we want to
That's-
hold some money back
Yes,
in case we
yes.
need to spend more in that area next year,
Okay.
or the next year. Yes. Not next year.
So, and the last bullet there is, how forward-thinking do we want to try to be, knowing that, as Texas Monthly put it, the foundation school program is built on a foundation of sand? Do we want to be able to continue to expand programs, provide more pay increases in future years, managing what we have now in a certain way, instead of just saying, oh boy, I hope the ledge gives us something more in 21? Because remember, 21, Two things are gonna happen in my prediction. The legislature is gonna say, education folks, 2019 was your year. Don't bother us this year. The only thing that we're gonna concentrate on, same thing, is redistricting. So I don't see a huge push for, I think the only thing they're gonna have to try and figure out is how to make it sustainable. But we're not gonna get like a, improvement on HB3 in 2021. Now that I've depressed you, have any other questions on that?
That's how I feel. It's terrible.
So,
For all your work and for helping make sense of what seems like madness.
Doesn't
I'm
seem
glad I'm
like it
able to
is.
pull off that it looks like I'm cleaning up. Yeah. So, with that wraps up, unless there's anything else, that wraps up our discussion of the general fund. Now, we're gonna quickly bounce through the other two funds which you're legally required to adopt the budgets for, the School Nutrition Services Fund and the Debt Service Fund.
Yeah, do y'all have questions?
No.
Okay,
That's-
for school,
Yeah.
Isn't it awesome?
all right,
I do.
okay, so turn it back over to Susie.
All right, are we ready to move on to something way more fun and has lots of good news? Okay, good. All right, school nutrition. One of my favorite things to talk about every year. Looking at their revenue, we're forecasting 34 million for 18-19, and we're doing a preliminary look at 19-20 of 35.2. You can see they get over 30% of their revenue from local funds. Those are payments for meals primarily. But they're heavily funded federally for meal reimbursements. So you can see over 60% of their revenue comes from the federal government, which means we have lots of things attached to them. But for growth, we're expecting 800,000 or 2.3% from this year to next. The reason for that growth would be an increase in the federal reimbursement rate. So we'll get a little bit more for every free and reduced meal that we serve. We will be increasing the price for adult meals. We actually don't have a choice on that. And so I'll show you what those increases are in a minute. The reason for that is when you are in the CEP program. The CEP program is the Community Eligibility Provision, and it allows us to provide free breakfast and lunch for every kid at schools that have high poverty. So you no longer need to know this one's free, this one's reduced. Everybody eats free at that campus. It's a great program. We've been rolling it out over the last few years. And because we're in that program, we have to have a minimum amount of meal prices. They have a floor, and we have to meet that. And so our adult prices are too low. We've got to raise them to meet that requirement. The feds do not like you not charging people enough if they're giving you a lot of money. So they don't want you to use their money to fund the people who are supposed to be paying. And so that's why we'll be increasing. So next year, we're going to roll out CEP to Garner, Kruger, Jackson, White, and Wood, and Royal Ridge. And here are our meal prices for 18-19 and 19-20. You can see we're only increasing the adults. Lunch will go from $3.40 to $3.85, and breakfast $2.20 to $2.25. And as you well know, $3.85 is a great price for a lunch. All right. $2.25 for a breakfast is unheard of. I can't get out a Whataburger for less than $5. But anyway. So I shouldn't be talking about Whataburger because I go there often. All right. Let's look at their expenditures. 18-19 is forecasted to be 35.2 million, and you can see they're a little bit different. I don't know if you noticed, but on the general fund, our salaries and benefits was about 86.7% of the whole general fund budget. School nutrition operates differently. They spend a lot of money on food. Not surprising. So you can see they're about 48% in salaries and benefits and 43% in food. That's the bulk of their expenditures. Next year, we're projecting an increase of 2.8 million or 8.1%. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. The growth in salaries and benefits there, we're including that 3% raise that we were modeling for you tonight. Small increases in contract services. $500,000 is in food and supplies. As you buy your groceries, I'm sure you see your grocery bill going up all the time. They are also looking at possibly adding some more attractive options. So higher end cuts of meat and avocado. I don't know if I'm supposed to, Sharon might get mad at me. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. It's an option, okay? I'm not committing them to anything right now, okay? So they're looking at higher end things, and if that's attractive, then if we get a lot of participation on it, everybody's going to hit the cafeteria for stuff next year. But if it is attractive, at some point in time, we might need to raise meal prices to offset those higher end items, but that's not necessarily needed right now. So that'll be up to them to implement. We're also going to increase capital expenditures next year. We're going to complete some projects that started this year. And then we're going to do some new projects, $300,000 for oven replacements, $150,000 for milk box replacements, and another $300,000 for middle school oven replacements. So lots of fun, exciting projects going on in school nutrition. And the reason why they need to do some of that capital stuff is because they have quite a bit of money. So our forecast for 18-19 ends up almost at break even, a loss of $743,000, but it'll end them with 3.2 months of fund balance. The feds do not like you to be over 3 months. And so when you're over 3 months, you have to file a plan with the Texas Department of Agriculture saying how we're going to spend it down. So that's why we have those large capital expenditures included in the plan, in the budget, to help spend that down. Our preliminary budget for next year would have them losing $2.8 million, but again, keep in mind, capital is a big part of that. It would bring them down, the budget would bring them down to 2.1 months. Keep in mind, they're always going to do better than their budget, because we budget, both in the general fund and in school nutrition, for that everybody who we're going to hire is there on day one, and they never leave, and they come every day. Well, we know that's not going to happen. We know that, unfortunately, some people are going to leave, go elsewhere. Some people are fortunately going to retire. So we're going to have vacancies. We're not going to pay for all that, but we always budget at 100%, just so that you know what your possible worst-case scenario spending would be. So in theory, they won't end up at 2.1 months, but we're going to budget at that level for it. And they've got plenty of room to do that, because we don't want them over 3. So that's it for school nutrition, unless you have questions.
How many elementary schools and how many middle schools?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I'll have to let you know. Sharon may be able to answer it off. I know. No, I meant to know.
We're going to have 30 total campuses next year on the CEP program, which would be 24 elementary and 6.
Okay, and I have a two-part question. And why not high school? Those children they're in the same community. They go to the same, they grow up. Why not? Why does it stop at middle school?
Well, we've been rolling it out slowly, being very conservative to make sure that we can collect the data that we need to maintain our funding, not just for school nutrition, but also for the general fund. And so we've just done one middle school this current year that just ended. We piloted it. So our next step is to add more middle schools. And there's always a possibility in future years, if the numbers are at the level they need to be, to add high school.
Okay, thank you.
This is we'll start our 4th year, I think, with the CEP. And the first year we started with one campus, because there's a lot of having to make sure that there's a lot of paperwork that we're having to gather. And so we wanted to make sure we were doing it right, because one of the districts in the area kind of jumped into it too quickly and actually lost some federal funding because they didn't, like 3 3 million or more, I think it was, that they lost because they didn't do the paperwork right. Okay, so we took a lot of time, thanks to our MIS folks, to Colleen and her folks, and took our time to make sure we were doing it right.
Okay.
And so as we move up a level, it gets a little bit more complicated. You know, it's easier to catch kids or parents at the elementary level, but as you move on to middle school, it gets a little bit more complicated, and then high school, totally different animals. So we'll keep watching the numbers. We're not guaranteed that we'll add every year, because there is a percentage that we a threshold that we do look at before we consider them to be in that program. But we'll have everybody, I think, if Sharon will correct me if I'm wrong, I think the campuses right now, elementary, middle school, everybody that's met that threshold are now on the program,
Okay.
or will be for next year.
Okay.
One, she mentioned, hurting the general fund. Under the old comp ed program, where the rule book has just been torn apart, your compensatory education funding was simply based on free and reduced lunch. Then they had to tweak it some when community eligibility provision came in and said, okay, well, how many of these campuses and kids are going to be on community eligibility? And so that tweaked the comp ed funding under the old system. So if we started adding in campuses that we shouldn't have, it would have actually been a detriment to the at-risk funding in the general fund.
Oh, my gosh.
So we had
And
to-
some in federal.
Every campus we added to CEP, we had to go, how is this going to affect general fund? Are we going to lose money on state comp ed there? So that's why we didn't just say, hey, let's just do all 40-something elementaries.
Okay.
It's a lot of work on the central office end and the campus end, but it's absolutely the best thing for the campus and for those kids. So, kudos to our staff for really jumping in and making it work.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, wrapping it up here, last thing we're going to talk about, the debt service fund. As I say every year, one thing to keep in mind, we adopt a budget based on our fiscal year, which is July 1 to June 30. Unlike the M&O tax rate, we have to be specific on the interest and sinking tax rate, the debt service tax rate, to be sure that we cover debt service payments between September and August. The year in we'll call that like for lack of a better term, our tax year for debt purposes. So within the July to June budget, we're going to have a little over 155 million in debt payments. 138.6 is our just normal required payments on our outstanding bonds and commercial paper. We do have still one bond issue outstanding that is called from the Qualified School Construction Bonds. This was a ARA project, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act program, where we got really cheap debt. It basically was supposed to be no interest debt. The feds will pick up the interest. Well, then they've cut that when when sequestration came in, which is sequestration is they take every program in the federal government and slash it by a certain percentage. It's averaged about 6%. So we're really on the hook for 6% of the interest on these bonds instead of 0%. So we'll have about 2 million in payments there. And last year, you signed or passed a resolution saying instead of lowering the INS tax rate, you wanted to use the excess collections to pay off debt quickly. That's what we're doing. We're going to have a $14 million call. Bonds that are eligible to be paid off well in advance of their maturity date, saving you years of interest payments on those bonds. So what are we going to do this upcoming year? Well, first thing, we have you guys just approved 3 bond orders. We have a maturing variable rate issue from 2014 that we're working on the paperwork on that as we speak. We will go to market in July, and that'll close in August. We anticipate that by September, we will be out of issuing authority for our commercial paper program. We can only get up to 100 million. Once we reach 100 million, we issue 100 millions of bonds, pay off the commercial paper, we can start doing commercial paper again. So we're going to continue our commercial paper program. The contract ended in May. We have extended it till May, in May of 2019, we extended it for 3 more years. We recommend that we maintain, once again, the INS tax rate at 32 cents. So their financial statement looks a little bit different because they have a huge amount in what's called other sources and other uses. I'll get there in a second. So for right now, we're thinking we're going to bring in revenue of about 140.5 million, expenditures of 155 million. Oh my goodness, we're over by 14 million. Yes, that's the excess collections from this year that we're going to spend next year on that resolution to buy down debt. So that's exactly what we expected to see. Other sources and other uses. Because these transactions that we're doing this year are refunding bonds, the accounting rules folk tell us that we have to record as if the new bondholders give us all the money when we sell the new bonds. That's another source. And then we record that we pay off all the existing bondholders of the bonds that we're refunding. So it's really the other sources and other uses is really just an on-paper bean counter thing. There's really no cash involved there for the most part. So we're actually going to reduce fund balance by about 13 million, but still with a very healthy 129 million fund balance. And remember, that's the fund balance as of June 30. We still have a lot of payments August 1 after that, and we don't receive more tax money until like November, December, or January. So we always have to make sure that we have enough money to cover other items. In this case, part of that fund balance is what we're setting aside to eventually pay off the principal of those qualified school construction bonds. As of this point, we do not anticipate coming to you with a large excess collections resolution for this year. We're actually going to structure the debt to where we're simply going to be required to pay off a bunch of debt early next year and not have to pick and choose what bonds are callable. We'll just have it laid out in black and white in front of us. You're going to pay this one. Boom, done. It's in the bond paperwork. We're not going to have to come to you with an excess collections resolution. And again, then $72 million has to be available after June 1 to pay the August 1 payments. So really our net fund balance after all of those items is going to be about 41 million. Still a really good number. We have no problems right now going on with our debt service operations.
And just as a reminder, that 41 million can't be spent on anything else. I mean, it's not like we can take that money and give raises with it. It's all for debt. That's what the debt service fund is. Just in case you were asking.
David wanted to know.
Yeah. I also like the way you ended that one rather than the previous one about the fund service. That much more upbeat.
So that is it, unless anyone has thought of any questions regarding anything we have spoken to tonight.
Any questions from anybody about this? I know you want to speak, but may I speak first? Or should I speak last? I just want to thank you both and Dan for everything. I saw y'all yesterday when I was coming back from the Tobin, and you just looked so dejected because at approximately 4:03 you got the email. But I know y'all have not slept. You've spent a lot of time here, and I just really appreciate everything that you and your team have done. And this was a great presentation, and you know, I feel pretty comfortable with what you've shown us tonight, thinking that we can probably do the scenario that you've kind of played out for us. But you know, we'll see if we get another email tomorrow at approximately 4:03.
Maybe it goes the other way.
Yeah, maybe we'll get it back. That would be awesome. So anyway, just thank you. Know that we really appreciate all the time that you've put into this. Y'all are amazing. And now it's your turn.
Thank you. You know, I do want to thank Susie, Brian, and Dan, because this is like building an airplane as we're flying it, and it really is. And You know, we spent today a lot of time together as trying to figure this out, trying to make certain that we don't put the district in a bad position in the future, but yet take care of people today. And that was a true piece. But I will tell you, it's been a team effort, y'all. It really has. These guys have been doing numbers, but Ron, Donna, Aubrey, Rudy, everybody's been in this as we're looking at everything and trying to figure out where we can save some things. But when you get no money for 8 years, the hens come back to roost, y'all, in a lot of places. And it's trying to navigate all of that, but they've all been truly great team members as we sort through this and coming with an understanding that this isn't set in stone and that we have to be mindful of that. They have all done a great job. I cannot say enough about all of them. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have anything else? Seeing none, item 7, adjournment, and the time is 8:18. Thank you all for being here.
No, I'm so glad that's.